Have you ever found yourself trapped in a place with someone you didn't fully understand? Someone whose presence forced you to look at your life in ways you'd been avoiding? That's exactly where I found myself when my stepson and I ended up stranded in a roadside hotel. It was supposed to be temporary, just a night or two while the mechanic sorted out our car troubles. But those few days turned into something much heavier, something I never could have predicted. The strange part was not the hotel itself, a faded place with buzzing neon lights and wallpaper that had seen better decades, but the silence that hung between us. My stepson, Daniel, was 19, caught somewhere between boyhood and manhood, and he carried a look that always seemed half resentful, half defensive. We had never been close, not really. I married his father when Daniel was still in high school, and while we'd managed civility, there was always distance. But being forced into the same room, the same routine, stripped away the walls we'd carefully built. It left us exposed, and in that exposure, I learned things I wasn't prepared for, about his father, about loyalty, about betrayal. Those nights in that shabby hotel changed the way I saw my marriage, my family, and myself. And the truth we uncovered there is one I still wrestle with today. When the car sputtered to its death on the highway, I thought it would be a simple inconvenience. A call to roadside assistance, a quick tow, and we'd be back on the road. But small towns have their own pace, and in this one, the only mechanic available told us it would take at least 3 days to order the part we needed. So there we were, me and Daniel, standing outside a repair shop with the sun beating down, realizing we had no choice but to check into the motel across the street. Daniel barely spoke as we rolled our luggage across the cracked asphalt. He shoved his hands in his pockets, his earphones dangling, his eyes fixed on anything but me. He'd always been like that with me, polite when he had to be, but never warm. His loyalty to his father was absolute, and I'd never tried to compete with it. I figured time would soften him, but years later, we were still strangers under the same roof. The motel clerk gave us a single key. "Only double rooms left," she said, chewing gum lazily. Daniel didn't flinch, but I caught the stiffness in his shoulders. Sharing a room with me wasn't his idea of comfort, nor mine. Still, we managed. That first evening, I tried to lighten the mood. I suggested we grab dinner at the diner down the block. He agreed reluctantly, scrolling through his phone the whole way. Over greasy fries and watery coffee, I studied him in the fluorescent light. He had his father's eyes, sharp, unreadable, but his own guardedness, a wall I couldn't climb. It wasn't until the second night that cracks began to form. Something about the forced proximity, brushing past each other in the cramped room, hearing the restless sighs at night, made it harder to maintain the silence. Daniel started asking questions, small at first. "How long have you and Dad been married? Did you ever think about moving out of state?" They felt harmless, but there was an edge to them, like he was circling something bigger. And when he finally pushed harder, when he asked, "Do you really trust him?" I felt the air shift. It was a question I'd been avoiding for years. At first, I laughed it off. "Of course I trust your father," I said quickly, maybe too quickly. "Why would you even ask that?" Daniel leaned back on the bed, arms crossed, his eyes narrowing. "Because I don't." The words hit harder than I expected. Daniel wasn't the type to open up easily, so hearing him speak with such certainty unsettled me. "What do you mean?" I asked, careful to keep my voice calm. He shrugged, but it wasn't casual. It was heavy. "He lies, all the time. You probably just don't notice." My instinct was to defend my husband. After all, I'd built a life on the belief that he was honest, dependable. But something in Daniel's tone, the quiet bitterness, made me hesitate. "Daniel, if you know something, you should tell me," I said softly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned toward the window, watching the neon sign flicker. For a long moment, I thought he would shut me out again, but then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "He was cheating on my mom long before you came along. I caught him once." My stomach dropped. "You're mistaken," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I heard the crack in them. Daniel shook his head. "I'm not. I was 14. I saw him with someone else. I never told her, never told Mom, because what good would it have done? She already knew, I think. She just pretended. I sat frozen, the air thick around me. 1,000 little moments replayed in my head. Late nights at the office, unexplained business trips, the times he avoided eye contact when I asked simple questions. Things I had brushed aside now resurfaced with ugly clarity. Daniel looked at me then, his expression both angry and sad. So tell me, do you still trust him? I didn't know how to answer. That night, I lay awake in the narrow motel bed, listening to Daniel's steady breathing in the other bed. My mind raced. If what he said was true, what did that mean for me? For us? For the marriage I thought was built on loyalty? The next day, Daniel pressed further. At breakfast, he asked, "Has he ever been completely honest with you? About anything?" I wanted to snap at him, to tell him to stop planting doubts in my head. But the truth was, I had my own suspicions. Ones I had buried because I didn't want to face them. Daniel wasn't creating them. He was unearthing them. By the third day, the silence between us was different. It wasn't avoidance anymore. It was weight. We were both carrying something too heavy to put down. And then, when I finally admitted out loud, "Sometimes I think he's hiding something from me," Daniel's face softened in a way I'd never seen before. For the first time, we weren't stepmother and stepson at odds. We were two people bound by the same betrayal. On the final night before the car was ready, Daniel handed me his phone. "I wasn't going to show you this," he said quietly, "but you deserve to know." It was a photo, grainy, taken from a distance. My husband, his arm around a woman I didn't recognize, outside a restaurant in another town. The timestamp was recent. "Just weeks ago," my throat closed. "Where did you get this?" Daniel looked down. "A friend saw them together. Sent it to me. I didn't know if I should tell you, but after everything, I couldn't just let you keep believing." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the bed, the cheap quilt scratching my palms. The evidence was undeniable. All the excuses, the late-night calls, the guarded tone when I asked about his schedule. It all fit. I felt anger, yes, but also something deeper. Grief. Grief for the marriage I thought I had, for the trust I had defended, for the years I spent convincing myself I was secure. Daniel sat across from me, his eyes searching mine. "I didn't tell you to hurt you," he said. I don't want you to be blind like my mom was." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized how much he had carried alone. The resentment I mistook for coldness was, in part, a shield. He had seen the truth long before I had, and it had hardened him. In that moment, I didn't see him as just my stepson. I saw him as someone who understood betrayal in a way I now did too. We didn't cry, though my chest ached with the weight of it. We didn't yell. We just sat in the dim motel room, the silence louder than anything we could have said. For the first time, the distance between us wasn't a wall. It was a bridge. The morning the mechanic called to say the car was ready, I felt strangely hollow. We packed in silence, each of us lost in thought. As we loaded the trunk, Daniel finally spoke. "So, what are you going to do?" I stared at the horizon. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I can't unknow what I know. Things will have to change." He nodded, his jaw tight, but there was a flicker of relief in his eyes, like he had been waiting for someone else to finally see the truth he had carried alone. The drive home was quiet, but not the same kind of quiet as before. It wasn't avoidance. It was understanding. When we pulled into the driveway, I sat for a long time before getting out. The house looked the same, but it wasn't. Not to me. The life inside those walls was built on a foundation I now knew was cracked. I turned to Daniel. "Thank you," I said simply. He gave a small nod, and for the first time, there was no resentment in his gaze. Just a shared heaviness, and maybe a strange kind of bond. That hotel stay didn't just strand us. It revealed us. It forced me to confront the fragility of trust and the cost of silence. And though I don't yet know what choices I'll make, I know this. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it just forces you to see the chains you've been living with all along.